Number 10, Flanking. The enemy takes double damage from other players this turn. When upgraded, the card cost goes from 2 to 1. Flanking is one of those cards that, when it can be played consistently or duplicated consistently, allows you and your teammates to just straight up explode enemies. The tricky part about this card is finding those turns where your team has good damage cards and you, as the Silent, have the energy to play it, while also blocking if needed. A lot of things need to line up between your decks to maximize its value, which is why it fits well into Silent builds that can generate a good amount of energy and draw, which isn't terribly hard to do via Silent's abundance of draw cards and Sly synergies. It pairs really well with Nightmare and Burst since it allows you to apply it more than once. Number 9, Misery. Deal 7 damage, apply any debuffs on the enemy to all other enemies. When upgraded, its damage goes from 7 to 9 and also gains Retain. Misery is obviously amazing in any multi-enemy fight within Slay the Spire 2. It gives you and your teammates the freedom of stacking all your debuffs onto one enemy to then spread to the others, thus maximizing how much weakened, vulnerable, or how much strength loss that they have. The upgrade is definitely worth getting if you can afford it, because the timing of when you play it can obviously be very important, and so having it available and in your hand is obviously very nice. The card does not exhaust, however, and so spamming this as much as you can never really hurts. This card obviously pairs very, very well with the other Necrobinder cards, Sleight of Flesh, and some of my favorite runs on Necrobinder in multiplayer have been with this card and multiple copies of Sleight of Flesh in play. Number 8, Glimpse Beyond. All players add 3 souls into their draw pile, exhaust. On upgrade, this card adds 4 souls instead of 3. This card is definitely not as sexy as the last two, since it clearly has a much lower ceiling as far as how much crazy value it can have in a fight. It exhausts, so you will not be playing it multiple times like you might with Flanking and Misery, and also it's not a card that visibly is changing the damage numbers you deal or reducing the damage numbers you're taking. You don't even really need to mention that you're playing this to your teammates, and so oftentimes it goes unnoticed. All that being said, real ones know how much work this card puts in. Drawing cards in a game that's all about cards is really good, and this card gives you and all your teammates a ton of it. It increases the overall consistency of every person on your team's decks during fights, since people are getting the right cards when they need them more often, and it's especially useful early in the fights when you and your teams need to get certain powers or cards in play to answer the problems every fight is presenting you with. Number 7, Energy Surge, Ignition, and Believe in You. Yeah, I put 3 cards here because they all felt like they kind of did the same things, but in slightly different ways. Playing cards is probably the next most important thing you can do after having cards available to you via draw. These cards all provide you with the opportunity to play more cards, which is obviously really good. Ignition is probably the best here since it gives you an extra energy every turn, which is hard to find in Slay the Spire 2 without considerable downsides usually. The only real problem I have with Ignition is that there's only one beneficiary, and so if you're playing a 3-player game, you've suddenly got to pick favorites, and then your friend's sitting there like, oh, okay, I see how it is, man. Believe in You also only offers energy to one person on the team, but the card doesn't exhaust. So throughout the fight, you can spread that love around to make everybody happy and make sure that the energy is being spent in the best place it possibly can be spent. Energy Surge is great for not only the beneficiaries, but also the defect playing it, since he too gains 1 or 2 energy every time he plays it in the fight, depending on if it's upgraded or not. Definitely prioritize these cards on teams where you have fellow Spire Slayers going into X-Cost cards and watch beautiful multiplications happen. Number 6, Shared Fate. Lose 2 strength, enemy loses 2 strength, exhaust. On upgrade, the enemy loses 1 additional strength, making it 3 total. There are quite a few good things about this card. The first good thing being is that it's free to play, so the only cost that you're really paying is the 2 strength that you lose, which usually isn't a big deal since the Necrobinder tends to have big attacks and not multi-attacks, and can also just get his damage through Asti, who doesn't get debuffed because he's just a hand. Strength loss is one of the best things you can do in multiplayer, since it means that everyone is taking less damage. This card does particularly well in most elite and boss fights, which I would argue are the most important fights in the game. Number 5, Debilitate. Deal 7 damage. Vulnerable and weak are twice as effective against the enemy for the next 3 turns. On upgrade, the debuff lasts 4 turns instead of 3, and it does 2 more damage. I don't feel like I need to say much about why this card is really good in multiplayer. You're hopefully going to have teammates applying as much vulnerable and weak as they can, so if you can also debilitate those same enemies, then you are literally doubling the effect that those status effects are applying. This means you deal even more damage as a team, while also taking even less damage as a team. It's not expensive to play, it's only 1 cost. I get that this card is obviously much harder to get to pop in Necrobinder solo runs, but for multiplayer runs when other people apply those statuses, 3 or 4 turns feels like a long time, and usually when I have Debilitate, I can apply it again before the first debuff I apply it expires, because I will already have shuffled it back via Souls or Grave Blast, so very good card. Number 4, Mangle. Deal 15 damage, enemy loses 10 strength this turn. On upgrade, Mangle deals 20 damage, and the enemy loses 15 strength this turn. I severely underrated this card for a good long while, since I just couldn't justify its energy cost at 3, especially after the first act boss. Like, going into the second act with a 3-cost card just didn't feel right, but I feel like I was really wrong about the card because it does everything that you want on a turn. It blocks for you, essentially, and it deals good damage. But it doesn't just block for you, it takes away a huge amount of strength from the enemy, meaning it blocks for basically everybody. So I just invite you to take this card in your next multiplayer run. Just have it in your deck. I promise it will pop off for you on multiple turns throughout the rest of the run. And it's just going to give you and your teammates so much freedom to finish fights quicker because you're going to be able to get powers and attacks down more freely and not have to block as much. So will you as the Ironclad take a little bit of damage here and there? Probably, but that doesn't really matter because you have a healing relic to start with. So just take it. Number 3, Enfeebling Touch. Ethereal, enemy loses 8 strength this turn. And then on upgrade, the enemy loses 11 strength that turn. It's at about this point that you might begin to notice a pattern about which cards I value the most in multiplayer. Enfeebling Touch is another card that takes away a large amount of strength from the enemy and effectively blocks for the whole team. So why do I have it higher than Mangle? Because this puppy dog does dang near the same amount of strength loss, but for only 1 energy. So if you're a Necrobinder in your co-op runs, then please just play this every time you see it, even if the enemy is not attacking. I think it's very important you keep it in your deck. You don't want it to go away because of Ethereal. Your team will thank you, and if they don't, then they don't know how much they're getting backpacked by you and your good card selection and playing skills. Number 2, Piercing Wail. All enemies lose 6 strength this turn, exhaust. On upgrade, they lose 2 additional strength, bringing the total to 8. If you are playing the Silent and co-op, please just click on this card every single time that you see it. I truly and honestly believe from the bottom of my heart that you could never have too many Piercing Wails in the deck. This card gives your team free turns. Oh no, we're about to take 25 damage from the Decamillipede. Nah, you're good, I got Piercing Wail. Oh my goodness, the Knights are effing me up this turn. Nah, I got Piercing Wail, don't worry. I'm screwed, I literally only drew infections and we haven't killed any of the Wrigglers. I'm pretty much dead. Nah, it's all good because this genius clicked on 5 Piercing Wails this run, and now he can block every enemy on the screen for the whole team for 1 energy. This card is stupid strong. It does not need upgrades. Just take it. It's common, so you're hopefully going to see it a lot during your runs. Before getting to what I think is the best card in Slay the Spire 2's multiplayer, I thought I would throw in some other cards I considered, but that did not make the top 10. So these are the honorable mentions. Starting off with Expose. Remove all artifact and block from the enemy. Apply 2 vulnerable. Exhaust. This card goes crazy in fights where enemies have Artifact, since Artifact is, in my opinion, the most annoying thing in multiplayer, since the amount they get does not seem to scale properly. The only reason it didn't make the top 10 is because I can only think of 2 enemies with that annoying Artifact, and those enemies are the Mecha Knight and the Chopper Bug Boys. It's a good card nonetheless. Next up, we got Crush Under. Deal 7 damage to all enemies. All enemies lose 1 strength this turn. This is a Regent card that I think does really well in a lot of hallway fights in the game, and for a common provides a lot of value. Next, we have Monarch's Gaze. Whenever you attack an enemy, it loses 1 strength this turn. Another really good Regent strength sapping card that I like, but it's just way too hard to get into play and then see maximum value from. You need multi-attacks to make this really pop off, but you also need energy because this puppy costs 3 to play unupgraded, so it's really good if you already got a deck it fits well into, but I find it hard to take most of the time. Last but not least among the honorable mentions is Largesse, which I just learned how to pronounce via Google. Another player adds 1 random colorless card to their hand. I decided to add this last second after a good run I had with it on A10 the other night. Me and a buddy had. I'm not a big fan of the idea of it. Feels like -1 draw for the Regent player since it rarely produces a card that also benefits him in some way. Additionally, when I have a Regent player who's playing it on me, I feel like it usually just floods my deck with expensive powers and attacks that I don't want, but sometimes this card does hit, and so for that reason I'll give it an honorable mention. Numero uno, number 1, the best card for multiplayer is Malaise. Enemy loses X strength, apply X weak, exhaust. On upgrade, enemy loses X plus 1 strength, apply X plus 1 weak, exhaust. While Piercing Wails are huge in every fight in Slay the Spire 2, Malaise is amazing in the most important fights in Slay the Spire 2, which are the boss fights and elites. Because the strength loss that Malaise applies is not temporary but permanent. Find a way to make this card game breaking and watch your team literally be getting hit by the Queen for 0 or 1 damage on Ascension 10.
Well, I think you've got plenty of time to kill her.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. 1 damage. The game is just such a walk in the park when the game's quote-unquote strongest enemies are just doing nothing to you every single turn. There are so many ways to abuse this puppy. Duplicate it via an ancient relic, duplicate it via a potion, royally stamp it with a very hot cocoa. I promise that if you look, you will find ways to abuse this card. Anyways, that's my favorite card for Slay the Spire 2 co-op. Just because I thought it would be interesting, I also decided to tally up how many cards from each character made it into my top 10, and so here are the final tallies. The Ironclad had 1 card in the top 10, Silent had 3, the Regent had 0, Necrobinder had 5, and the Defect had 2. So does that make the Necrobinder the best character for Slay the Spire 2 co-op and the Regent the worst? Luckily, I already made a video on that subject as well, so if you want to hear my thoughts on which characters perform the best in multiplayer, then go check out my Ascension 10 multiplayer character tier list. If you made it this far in the video, then thanks for watching, God bless you, and I hope to catch you in the next one. See ya.